Welcome to our latest episode of our mentor trainings. We're here to talk about communication skills, tips and tricks for successful relationships. I'm Sarah, the program manager here at Boulder Options.
And I'm Lucy Bossert, the health and wellness program coordinator.
So we're here to tell you all of our favorite tips for communication. I would say that Lucy and I are both communication aficionados, or what would you say?
Gurus?
Gurus. We both love communication a lot. Lucy, how did you describe yourself as a kid?
My parents called me the little lawyer because I could talk myself in and out of any situation.
So we definitely have you are a professional here, and we're really excited to learn from you, little lawyer. But we want to start, we're going to start this episode with two slides, one about youth development and another about caregivers and some general tips. So we're going to basically start with things you should know, the logistics of communication, and then we're going to talk about how to get to know your youth, how to be a better communicator, how to deepen your connection with others. So we're going to start with some of these things you should know, and we're going to start with youth development. So a really important thing is that youth are developing their frontal lobes, which can mean that they are learning at a really rapid rate. If you've ever met someone in elementary or middle school, or if you remember back to when you were in elementary school, you're probably like, wow, I can't believe that I memorized, like for me, I was thinking this the other day, I can't believe I memorized these plays. I used to memorize plays all the time. And I would just like pick them up so quickly. Or French, I learned French and I picked it up so quickly. Don't really remember it now, but sometimes weird French words pop into my head because your brain is a sponge.
Yeah, I memorized the entire Gettysburg Address and like a whole stanza in Hamlet one time.
Wow, we're definitely going to have a variety show here sometime soon. And your youth would be great at it. They are soaking up all this information. But because there's so much information to soak up, it means that they're paying a lot less attention. Also, their frontal lobes, that lobe that is in charge of your impulse control, is developing. So it's not full, which means it's going to be really easy for the kids to dart around to the newest shiny thing that is in their frame of reference. Kind of related to this, youth are predisposed to taking risks. They're starting to understand the world, understand themselves, and kind of go outside of their comfort zone. And some of these risks can be good and some can be bad, but humans are naturally predisposed to take positive risks because we're built to survive. So just remember that youth want to be good, people want to be good, and they might take some big risks, and we can help them make positive risks, but they have to learn, just like anything else.
Right, and so during this brain development, they're forming a lot of pathways in their brain, and this mapping of the brain, they can really learn these positive communication skills, and it's very important that they do at this point because they're forming all of those connections in their brain that are going to help them for the rest of their life. They also need you as mentors to help them learn healthy communication habits. So maybe they don't have adults in their life that are teaching them this right now. So it's really important for you to be there and show them positive communication skills. And remember to be patient.
So Lucy, you mentioned you were a little lawyer, which I love thinking of little Lucy as this lawyerly type child. But when you were younger, would you say that you were perfect at like interpersonal communication?
Absolutely not. I was not very good at listening to other people and understanding what they were feeling.
And when did you become good at that?
I would say probably pretty recently. I feel like this is something that everybody's been working on their entire life, but I would say most recently I've gotten a lot better at those active listening skills.
Yeah, I would say the same is true for me too. So remember, your youth are learning these skills that maybe some of you even aren't perfect at yet. And I would say nobody's perfect at communication. It's going to be a lifelong journey. So keep that in mind too. Be patient.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about caregiver considerations. So when you're communicating with the caregiver of the youth in the program, these are some things that you should really remember about them. First of all, caregivers are busy.
Super busy.
Some of the busiest people I actually know. I think of people who take care of kids, and I just can't imagine living that life. It's just so busy.
Yeah, I struggle with my dog.
Right. I don't even have a dog, and I'm just busy. But, man, sometimes these caregivers in their busy lives can drop communication. And this isn't necessarily a reflection on you. It's nothing that you did. They just have a lot going on, and responding to your text message might have fallen to the bottom of their to-do list. And sometimes this not getting back to you right away can make them feel guilty, and can actually make the issue worse and make them not want to get back to you. So I think of times like I have a friend who will call me and want to get together, and then I won't return their phone call for a really long time, and then I want to get together with them, but I'm afraid to get back in contact with them because I ignored their phone call entirely. So think about times like that. So seek out interactions with the caregiver that aren't just about planning what you're going to do next with the youth. Think about building that relationship. So what do you do, Sarah, to kind of open that line of communication if it gets kind of weird?
Ooh, sometimes it depends on the caregiver and kind of the nature of my relationship with them. There was one time a parent that I have a really good relationship with but hadn't talked to in a while. Like I had messaged her and I hadn't heard anything back. And I actually was driving my car, and I had talked to her at one point about her favorite band, and a song from her favorite band came on, and I just texted her, "Oh my gosh, that song that I know you love came up, and I thought of you. I hope you're doing well." And she texted back probably within 2 minutes. And from there, we were able to start a conversation, and I could ask her questions about her child's relationship and if she was coming to an event we were having. So that was a great one. Have you ever had any experiences like that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's certain caregivers that are really hard to get a hold of, but as soon as I text them something asking about, I know they were searching for a job last month, and I ask them again, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I found something," or just like texting people emojis, or just like asking about, what their kids have been up to, that kind of thing really opens the door of communication again.
Yeah.
And we just want to remind you too, just not give up. You may not get a response right away, but if you're persistent and consistent, you'll have good results.
Yeah, and something I do want to add here, which I should have put on the slide, but maybe next time, is that even if, like, we give emoji text or we'll talk about a song on the radio, we text like that, and it's not always about logistics. It doesn't always end up as a logistic thing. It could just be a way to be like, "Hey, thinking of you. I hope you're doing well." And I think those are important too, because you don't want to seem like every positive interaction has an ulterior motive.
Right.
So here's some general communication tips for facilitating hangs. We want you to stay in contact and make sure to connect in ways that work for the youth and the family. Lucy and I talked about, what's your favorite way to communicate? And mine, so I said mine is texting. I love texting because then I can see who's texted me, what they've said, and it's easy for me to go back and be like, "Oh yeah, they did tell me dinner was scheduled for Tuesday and I totally forgot." And I asked Lucy, "Do you like to text?" And she said,
"No, I have a flip phone. I'm living in like the 19th century here."
So we decided, Facebook is kind of like texting, so we're going to communicate over Facebook. Yeah, and it's worked out very well.
Yes, it has.
And so, again, use social media to communicate if it works for you. If you are like me and you like texting and you like seeing what you've written, consider social media, consider email. If the parent has social media or email and wants to do that, review the social media policy, do what feels comfortable to you, and don't do anything that doesn't. Yeah. Next is be consistent. We've talked a little bit about consistency, but it's super important to stay in contact and be accessible, because it can be really triggering for youth and families. Some youth are used to being kind of dropped off the face of the planet because they feel like they don't matter to anybody. So you can show them that they matter to you by staying in contact. Some youth also maybe have been bullied or don't have really good relationships and constantly wonder, like, is there something wrong with me? So being consistent also shows them that, no, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm here for you. The last thing I want to say on this is start each communication fresh. It's really easy to carry baggage from a previous conversation, like maybe you didn't like the way your youth said something to you, and you can address stuff like that, but don't carry that in the way that you talk to them or not talk to them, because you do want to continue that conversation.
So we have another podcast about motivational interviewing, but interviewing and communication definitely go hand in hand. And motivational interviewing is a way to communicate with your youth and family. So we're going to do a little refresh.
Yeah, so this is us really moving away from the things you should know to how you can do it.
All right.
And you can do it.
Yes, you can. So motivational interviewing, like I said, is a great way to open those doors of communication, those lines of communication. So some things to remember about motivational interviewing is you want your conversations with the youth and their caregiver to be collaborative. You don't want to worry about always being the authority on an issue or always being right. You don't know where they're coming from and their perception on things, so don't always assume that you are in the right. Try to look at it from all angles.
Yeah.
It should also be evocative. Your communication should be evocative. It should seek to identify motivation and commitment and not necessarily look for right or wrong answers, but maybe the whys behind some things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, your communication should be autonomy focused. Recognize that the youth that you're working with and their families are autonomous with you. Nobody is above anybody in this relationship. Nobody has the upper hand. Mm-hmm. They should also be empathetic, really thinking about standing in each other's shoes and thinking about the conversations that you have with them from their perspective. Also, your conversations should be in support of self-efficacy, really having the youth and their caregiver have their say in things and take their position on things and to have everybody speaking for themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, being resilient. You are going to just expect resistance from your youth on something during the year together. Adolescents are really good at this. And you just need to be able to roll with it, go with the flow, and know that things will probably change in the next 10 minutes. And then, go ahead.
No, go for it.
And then it's finally focused on developing discrepancy skills and really making the youth think critically about their views or what they say in conversations with you.
Yeah. So this is a lot to remember. It's a kind of lofty goal for all of your communication. So we're going to show you how you can do this. We're going to give you some examples to really build up those resiliency skills and empathy skills and make things collaborative. And the way to do it is these dots you see on the page, affirming your youth and their caregiver, questioning the youth and caregiver, listening, matching their emotional state, positive decision-making skills, and summarizing for them.
So first of all, using affirmations. So remember this, that youth are developing a sense of strengths and weaknesses in themselves, and they need you to kind of help them be a mirror. Mm-hmm. So you really want to build their confidence by using affirmations. So telling them that you admire the way that they pushed through that last lap, mm-hmm. or telling them how admirable they are for getting their grade up a grade level in math, mm-hmm. and putting in the work.
Do you have an example of a time that you had an affirmation that worked for you?
So I really love to put Post-it notes all over my house. It sounds kind of silly to give yourself affirmations, but it feels really good if you look in the mirror and you see a Post-it note and it says, "You can do it." It's like, man, I really can. Or on my keyboard at work, I have a little Post-it note that says, "Make mistakes." Because that's also an affirmation, just telling myself that it's okay to be a human being.
It's okay to take risks, Lucy.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Another great way to do this, to communicate with your youth and to build that relationship, is to choose non-threatening questions. And this can, especially in the beginning, help you build a rapport with your youth, get to know them, make them feel heard. So questions like, who do you admire? What makes them admirable? What do you like to do in your free time? What are your strengths? What are your hopes for the future? What have you done in your life that you feel proud of, even just a little bit? And you'll notice all of these are open-ended questions. So there's no right or wrong answer to them. There's no yes or no. You're really looking to understand what that youth believes about themselves or about other people. Lucy, is there anybody that you admire?
Yeah, I really admire my partner's grandmother. I'm actually thinking about her because we're going to celebrate her 92nd birthday this weekend. And last year for her birthday, her family convinced her to go out kayaking. She had never been kayaking before. She's 91 years old. She got in a kayak and she did it.
Whoa.
And she's just one of those people that just really is involved in so many things. She's always writing poetry and being creative. And I just want to be just like her someday. All right, so the next one is to listen and inspire listening and then doing this non-judgmentally. So listening non-judgmentally means that you're listening more than you talk. And this really opens the door for the youth to realize that you value their opinions and thus they'll trust you more. If you think about times that you've had conversations with people and you know they're just thinking of the answer and what they're going to say next to you, you know they're not actually listening to you, you don't want to share a lot with that person because they're not going to actually absorb what you're telling them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you say.
Right, exactly. It's also important to discuss ethical and moral problems that are in the news or that the youth may encounter in their life. So make them think of things like, an example we can use is not necessarily imparting your political views onto them. Maybe talking about the upcoming election, but just talking more about the issues and thinking about both sides of things and really getting them maybe to vote as soon as they're able, but not necessarily making them want to sway one way or the other.
Yeah, or even like not just pressuring them to vote, because they might do that one time for you and never do it again. But if you can inspire, if you can listen to them, maybe about their worldview or the things that they think are important, and then help them understand that voting might help further their worldview, they might be more likely to vote in the future because they implicitly understand the importance of voting. So that would come from listening to their thoughts and opinions.
And letting them talk through issues out loud and really problem solve out loud with you, or just go through their thought process and why they think something should be a certain way is really important. And this is without challenging their point of view, but wondering aloud maybe how others might perceive that same issue and kind of thinking about what the opposing side or somebody else might think from the outside on that particular issue.
Another really great way to create positive communication and authentic communication is asking open-ended questions. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but open-ended questions inspire conversation based on authentic curiosity, and it helps you think through ideas and options. It also feels way less like an inquisition and is much less threatening. So if I came into work and my question was, Lucy, do you like oranges?
Yes.
Do you want to eat oranges right now?
Yes.
Why? I guess that's an open-ended question, so.
Why do you keep asking me about oranges?
Yeah, because, when you ask yes or no questions, there isn't much of a follow-up. Maybe they'll continue that conversation, but maybe they'll just say yes or no, and so you're left to ask another question. And nobody really likes just constant questions. I mean, maybe some people do, but...
Not me.
Yeah, not me either. So a really good way to switch that up is not say, do you like oranges, but Lucy, how do you feel about oranges?
I feel really positively about oranges. I really enjoy oranges. They make me think about the time I lived in California and I got to go orange picking, and that was just a really happy time. And so that the thought of oranges just brings me back there.
Oh, and see, now I want to know all about her picking oranges, and I don't know anything about that. So that is an authentic curiosity of mine. I want to go into that conversation a little more deeply.
All right. So ask questions to understand the youth's thought process behind things. We kind of touched on this before, just in the slide before this, but asking why questions tend to put people on the defensive. So if I came to the office and Sarah didn't come to my event that I had last night, and I said, Sarah, why weren't you at the event last night? She'd kind of feel attacked. Do you feel attacked?
Yeah, I would. I'd probably even if you didn't say it like, why didn't you come? Even if you're like, why didn't you come to the event last night? I'd be like, oh, now I have to come up with my valid excuse, but why is she asking me that? She's not my boss. She's not the boss of me. It's a free country.
So maybe instead what I should ask is, what were you up to last night?
And I would say, well, I had a meeting with a family. Thank you for asking, Lucy. It went really well.
And that way nobody's on the defensive and nobody is attacking anybody else with a why question.
Mm-hmm. But Lucy still got the information she was after.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. A really important thing to remember is that when you're talking with your youth, and this might especially come up when you know your youth a little bit more, is to match the youth's emotional state, unless it's really hostile. If the youth is in a hostile emotional state, you can be calm and patient. That might be a good way to help them calm down. But for example, if the youth is really excited about something, they're probably going to want to see you be excited too. If they were like, oh my God, I have never biked that far before, and you were like, I have.
Yeah, it would make them feel very excited about the fact that they just did that.
Right. But if you were like, wow, I'm so happy for you. I was super happy when I did that too. Like, that's so exciting. You know, you're matching the state and the youth feels safe in being emotional with you and having emotions that aren't, you know, just normal, bland emotions. That is especially true, like, if they're really sad. It might be good not to be like, oh, I'm so sorry you're sad. How are you doing? You know, that might make them shut down. Mm-hmm. But if you're like, wow, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you doing with this emotion you're experiencing? That might go over a lot better. Because when you're reflecting, you are helping them understand their own feelings, and it makes them feel understood. And it also helps build the idea that you need to have empathetic responses to people, which is, again, we mentioned in the very beginning, youth are developing empathy. They're learning what the heck empathy is. And so if you can coach them through that process, they're gonna learn it faster and be much better off for it. They're gonna be able to build deeper relationships in the future. And that's a beautiful thing.
All right, so casually modeling rational decision-making strategies. This is really important because, again, youth are building those pathways in their brain, and it's really important to talk aloud about problem solving and making rational decisions. So a way that you can do this is to discuss how you once have arrived at a decision. And keep in mind that the adolescent has a relatively short attention span, so try to keep it really short.
Yeah, so a good example of this is if I was a youth and I said to Lucy, I'm really hungry and I'm going to go to the store and buy chips.
Okay, well, I got to the store and I only had $5 in my pocket. And so I really wanted to buy chips, and I thought about it, and I walked up and down the aisles. But then I decided pasta is only $1, and a jar of pasta sauce is only $3, and a pepper is another $1, so that's $5. I can go home and make a whole big meal, and maybe even have leftovers for tomorrow.
And I did see you eating pasta this afternoon, so
yep,
must have worked in your favor. So if I was a youth, I would listen to that and be like, okay, I heard that Lucy was hungry, like I'm hungry right now, and she chose something that will last her longer and fill her up more. So maybe that's something I could do too.
Right.
And so I just modeled my own reflection. I just modeled my own reflection on decision making. And that's kind of where you can weigh the pros and cons of a situation with your youth, consider what the current path will lead them to, and reflect on your own decisions. So questions you could ask a youth in the moment is, how would you have handled the situation differently now? What was good about this decision? What was challenging or negative about the decision? And just a little bit about adolescents. If you remember from the adolescent podcast, is adolescents are learning a lot about their peer groups. So you might have these questions a lot when you're talking about their friends and their friend choices. But in the example of this pasta meal that we were just talking about, I could ask questions. If it was flipped and I was actually the mentor, I could ask Lucy, like, what do you think was good about your decision to buy pasta?
Well, I was full last night and I got lunch today, so it was a lot more filling and I got a lot more bang for my buck.
And then what was challenging about that pasta decision?
Well, I was really hungry when I was in the grocery store and I wanted something that I could eat really fast. But I think making the decision to take a little bit longer was actually probably better.
Yeah. And so now you know, Lucy, that when you're faced with a challenging decision, like you're so hungry and you only have $5, you know that you can make it through that challenging situation and end up with still a really good meal. Mm-hmm. So you're learning resiliency at the same time as you're modeling rational decision making.
All right, so finally, summarizing is really important. So after you've had this whole conversation with your youth, let them hear their thoughts reflected back to them. So if they explain something to you and then you say it back to them, it shows them that you are, first of all, really listening to them, but also that it builds a sense of trust. They can now understand and trust you. Mm-hmm. To listen to them when they say something.
Mm-hmm. It can also clarify misunderstanding. Like if you say this pasta thing happened and at the end of it I tried to summarize it and I said, Lucy, it really sounds like you were disappointed with your pasta purchase, right?
No, I actually wasn't upset with my pasta purchase. I really wanted the chips and salsa, but I'm ultimately pretty happy that I have pasta for lunch today, too.
Oh, got it. Okay, so you're happy that you got the pasta.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that we're on the same page. I understand what she felt. She knows that I heard her, and now we can move forward feeling trust in each other. So that's kind of it for our motivational interviewing refresher, how to communicate with your youth, and you can also use those skills with your caregiver or other people in your life, as I do. I love doing this. But some things to ask you to help reflect, if you're doing some self-reflection or self-summarizing, to use the last few slides that we looked at. One is, really, have you spoken with your mentee and their family lately?
Yeah. And what was your conversation about? Was it just about logistics, or were you actually genuinely interested in finding out what's been happening with them?
Yeah. And then how often do you ask them yes or no questions? So maybe you checked in with the caregiver and you asked them about their vacation, which is great because you're not just asking about logistics, but did you ask it in a yes or no question? How could you have rephrased that to allow them to have more room for conversation?
And then also think about what a time that maybe you've communicated with your youth, caregiver, or somebody that you work with, somebody in your family, that you could have facilitated the conversation a little bit better using these techniques. Think about that.
Mm-hmm. So we hope you enjoyed this podcast. This is it for us on communication, the tips and tricks for a successful relationship. We look forward to seeing you at our future podcasts, and thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Gotta have a ticket for a walkthrough. Everything I do is big. We gon' talk big money.